We've got just about 10 minutes. I thought it'd be useful if anyone to look at something in more detail what John was talking about. It'd be useful, I know primarily questions to John, but also we can have Ines and Rita up there as well, just in case any questions about it that way. If anybody has any questions, stick your hands up. No? Yeah.
I don't know, John, whether while you just came across with another around issues around, I don't know, I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't hurt people's feelings, you know, stakeholder groups, or maybe stroke gatekeepers within the community, maybe organisations, large voluntary organisations, community organisations, they've been embedded within communities for a long time, and maybe been bought off in some way, maybe even local residents been bought off by the promises of houses or whatever else. They just come up, through the process, they just come up against that in any way, and what was the sort of mechanism to sort of alleviate that?
I think that maybe one of the things about St. Michael's Estate is that it's a very clearly defined geography, right? There are a number of stakeholders. There's one principal project on the site, which is Rita's project, and then there's probably 2 or 3 other projects around, like the youth project, the community drug team, then you have the schools and the partnerships and all of that. But my sense is that what the projects effectively did was they agreed to collaborate and cooperate as far back as 2001, and the Regeneration team is the expression of local projects saying we work together and we will develop a common agenda, which effectively was the past, present and future document in print, saying this is what we would like to see from the project. Like, you have different levels of participation, but I think it's been held within that for that time.
Well, I would say that in the first collapse of the first plan, that the kind of partnership in our area, which was made up of Dublin City Council and the local development structure, weren't very supportive of us, and they kind of asked questions when we set up our campaign, because on our first devastation we were really on our knees, and we didn't know how to come back above it, and they said, what are you trying for? And it took us ages to go back into that room and convince them to come on our side. But we did the local drugs task force, which would have been very much on the edge, which has supported us very much. But I think the strength of us has been really in the Family Resource Centre, the youth project and the drugs team. They were they grew organically from the people out of the estate. They owned them and they pursued them, and I never really thought about never know me place or us never knowing our place, but it was a very good thing to me today, because it makes sense as that I'm always in trouble, so is John, and it is about not knowing me place, and I'm delighted that we don't know our place.
Just can I make a point of that though? I work with the residents, and one thing the council does do at times is they can, so over the 10 years, some of the active residents have been on transfers. You know, so that can happen, because sometimes you get to train and you do some work with residents, they become leaders, and you will find if something begins to go wrong, sometimes the council can actually try and form relationships with particular residents and offer them good accommodation off site, and that can happen. So just be careful of that, because I've seen that happen. Then what happens is the community development project has to start all over again, recruit new members, training them up, bringing them along, skilling them up. Do you know, even though those residents have moved, will offer the skills somewhere else, but it makes the job very difficult, because finding your feet in regeneration and some of that stuff is very hard for us as professional workers, let alone residents who are just coming inside the door for the first time to go to meetings. So
and just to add, in terms of when you were saying how do you alleviate the problem in terms of if you don't have consensus, we would meet every Thursday to work out actions on any issues that may arise and strategise. But one of the major features of the whole thing is around consensus. Now, we're not saying that we don't disagree from time to time on specific issues, but ultimately, at the end of it, we move forward, right? And we understand, obviously, that we're not going to agree 100%, but that consensus is reached. And maybe if it's not reached on one particular day, on a Thursday or whatever other meeting we attend, it is ultimately reached, and we move forward together into other spaces with that consensus. So I think that does work very favourably and alleviates possible potential conflicts elsewhere.
Thanks very much. Any other questions? Paul?
just in relation to what you were saying yourself there, Inez, the model that we were all told for years was the only model, and to get real with it and to work within that. Now that has imploded, you can actually see the reverse psychology now beginning to be used already by saying, listen, because everything has imploded and because there is now less money for government investment, then really you're not going to get what you need. The first example coming up is Upper Longstreet. We've been told recently that the whole idea for redevelopment is now not going to happen because there's no money, and it's going to be probably rehabbing, in an area where you have subsidence, dampness, everything else that's there. They're going to rehab, and I just wonder what's your views on that, because no matter what the sort of condition is, the same argument's always used. It doesn't matter whether it's a play park, it doesn't matter whether it's paving stones fixed. We had burst pipes the other day in Carlisle Walk, where sewage and what have you was running by people's doors for 2 days, and we couldn't get departments even to agree with responsibility for sorting that out. And what they've done is a patched up job at the minute. So basically what I'm asking, what's a bigger question? That's the way they're going to come at us again. Even though the system that they've been saying is the only one that works, driven by private market forces, they're going to use the reverse argument that because that's imploded, there is no more money for public investment. And how do you actually, how do you work against that?
No big.
You don't answer that in 5 seconds.
Yeah, answer that in 5 seconds. No big answers. What I thought was fascinating listening to John, when in fact what the council officials or whoever are saying now is we just wait till the market comes back the way it was in a number of years' time. God luck to their wit, But in a sense, it's still the belief that that's the model.
That's the only way.
As near as I can get an answer is this, right? We have got to hold our nerve that the work that we are doing is setting the terms of debate, right? For effective expenditure of public monies, right, to which people are accountable, right? For effective quality of life provisions, and for effective, if you like, link to the bigger economic world, right? We have got to hold our nerve on those issues, and in a sense, it links the big to the wee, right? I actually think unless we actually organise from, if you look at the kind of work, and there's plenty of examples, right? If you look at kind of work in the Rights Project, when we started on the issues around the pitch and shit in the housing, what are you doing that for? But it went like that to expose both the reaction to ordinary residents as rubbish, right? But in a sense, we exposed both the waste of monies and what they were doing. The residents held to it and have moved from that confidence. I don't think there's any answer that isn't based on the believing and proving, believing first and proving second, that the ability of ordinary people, particularly ordinary people who are excluded, to actually produce more effective democratic and economic answers than the rubbish that has come through, right? Now, how do you do that? All I'm trying to say, there's not an opportunity. They will use the reverse psychology. So what? I've lived through Thatcher's and they use the same sort of value for money and all the rest of it. You have to actually not, and I suppose the bottom line I've learned in all of that is you don't react in their terms. Don't react. I remember when we were fighting when we were fighting privatisation in the worst of Thatcher times, and there was only one game in town, which is cut this and cut that. We took a decision that we would not, what we were going to do was look how to assert the value of our members. Don't cut cleaning hours, assert that hygiene is important to medicine. The same work that we're doing now is to take the lessons that we've all learnt and to say these are the things that actually are effective economic and democratic practice, and that's the ground on which we stand. Now, all I'm saying, there's an opening for my saying is, and brother, the ground that you stood on is pretty shaky. And when they tell us that there's nothing else that can be done, right, we can't do this because of, right, I think it gives us the opportunity now to say, these, whatever we're going to be done has to be done in this way, right? And I think we're going to produce some more effective answers. They're going to say no to Longstreet. They're going to say no. Till when? Another 10 years of waiting for the magic markets to come back. So I've no big answers, Paul. But I do actually think we need to hold our nerve, both I think in the work that you've uncovered. It's not the thoughts and ideas that we're having at the moment about how to ensure participation to affect itself in democratic and economic governance are not just here. It is happening in other places around the world. I think we just got to connect our stories. But when they come back at us and say, actually, you can only do it this way, I say, no. We have got to hold our term. And there is something, and rights are not an answer in themselves. But what rights do is stop making your struggle a singular struggle. They put them in a context in which here's international standards. Here's the basis on which you've got to prove how you're going to spend the money gets that purpose, rather than us proving that what we want is okay for us. I think any trick in this game that we've learnt is to put the boot on the other foot, that they have to prove what they're doing is effective. Now, actually, I think they proved it isn't. So the next step is don't fall for the other terms of debate. There's nothing can be done. In the way that they said only thing could be done is in our terms, and now saying that nothing can be done, we've got to put our arguments forward and prove, if you like, for example, in North Belfast, what monies are they going to expend in Northern Ireland in social housing? Well, you should ask somebody like Nicola, who's analysed the social housing guidelines. Do you know that they've stopped ring fencing North and West Belfast and Derry? Guess the areas which have the greatest social housing problems in Northern Ireland. If we let those answers lie as they are, right, we've got to go back to the fact that what they're proposing, right, you can't do anything at Longhouse, so what are they proposing to spend any money that they've got on? Where are they proposing to spend it? Bangor? Which apparently, by the way, I'm not joking, Bangor is where they are proposing to spend it, right? We've got to get hold of those issues and arguments and actually pull the leg from under them, politically, organisation, legally, tactically, but fundamentally through the voices of the people who are affected. If we only see the voices of the people who are affected as useful to make a noise, then actually we're worse than the others. They've actually got to be the core to it.
And I would say, don't buy into their myths. That's where I would say.
She summed it all up much better.
Don't buy into their myths, because if you have watched how they have managed to set up the private workers against the public workers at the moment, it's a very interesting way they've used the media. And I think what John was saying about public housing and public land is that what they're using as a myth down beyond is, there's nothing but antisocial behaviour or all those kind of things. We have to dismantle communities. There are very good people who live in local authority communities. And what I would say to you, right, if they're not doing it now, don't let them get the land, defend the land, and we fought for the land. It doesn't matter up or down this country. Don't let them get the land, because that's what they're after.
Thanks very much. Is there any other questions? We can just go ahead, Mary, and then we'll just wrap it up after that.
Okay, John, just where do you go from here now?
Instagram.
I mean, all the stuff that is done and learned, I mean, it's been brilliant that we can also learn from it. But because now the PPP, which is, I mean, it obviously was doomed to failure from the start. Yeah. Anything that's for privatisation has to be. You might think part of our problem is that we fail to recognise the enemy, right? So where does it leave us now?
We've been asking that question since May last year, and in a way we're in a bit of a limbo, right? Because the conventional relationship here is between the residents of St. Michael's Estate and the state, right? We would have expected the state to deliver a programme of regeneration, right? But what has actually happened is that the state has just failed completely, right? Abdicated its responsibility, became a handmaiden capital in the 90s, and set their agenda. And one of our difficulties is because like a lot of us still believe that it's the state's responsibility to deliver a public housing programme, right? But the real difficulty we have is that the state has failed and is continuing to fail. So we're between a rock and a hard place. So from going for a full 14-acre regeneration programme down to a 4-acre, down to a 2-acre, that's been the signal of intent for us, right, in the context of Jesus. And even last week, there's a 4-acre site on one of those plans up near the graveyard where the residents were to have a choice of housing, right? And there's 14 families left, and there's only 10 conventional houses, right, for the 14 families. So even in the last section, they denied them their choice of. So all of them that were left, and the city council's answer was to say to us, well, it doesn't really matter because they won't be here anyway, right? Across the table. So one of the things we've been forced into has been to look elsewhere. So we went to Liverpool before Christmas. We looked at the Eldonians project on just off the Vauxhall Road, which ironically enough Thatcher gave them 15 million in the mid-80s to begin the first phase, right? Because she fucking hated Liverpool City Council, right? She gave them the money, and it's a very interesting story. But the difference is that it's a decentralised model which remains in communal ownership, right? And remains owned at that, so you can never own the house you live in. But yet the standards of the estate were, it's very simple, but really good and really high standards that are very entrepreneurial in terms of developing their social economy, right? And almost becoming property developers in and of themselves, right? That maybe that's where you end up, right? But that's so there's another project that we're going to look at in London in March, hopefully, called the Coin Street project on the south bank of the Thames, where they've run the regeneration scheme through mutual cooperatives, right? 4 small ones, right? But the scale of the project is perhaps the significant thing. Like PPP, as I said, went from 63 million in 2003, 256 million the PPP was going to cost for Michael's, right? We do not need a project that costs 256 million. The cost of the project could be far, far less, right? We did not need 480 private apartments when there's 40,000 empty private apartments all over Dublin that people aren't living in, right? So if you set the Bernard McNamara, who are they for? Oh, don't worry, right? So the scale of the projects can be different, and that issue arose on all of the projects in Dublin because the model was dictating what the projects looked like, right? So PPP was dictating this project has to have this particular construction with so many private apartments because it has to fund itself. Whereas if you were just funding the public infrastructure in another way, they would never have been on that scale. And the density, like, with the sort of re-emigration backwards out of the country, we don't need the densities anymore. So in a way, we're still looking at, in a way, the council are the safe bet for delivering the first phase of Michael's. They haven't got the money yet, incidentally. They have to go to the department, so we could find, we don't know how that will go, right? They have to go back to the Department of Finance to get that money. But the other issue, there are other issues about how you restructure the rest of the main section of the estate. So there are other groups that are literally circling around Michael's estate. There's a group called Cork and Jennison who run big. Yeah. They run 22,000 public housing units in Boston. They want St Michael's Estate. They want Dominic Street, now Devaney Gardens. They want to run and manage. They want to be the major landlord in Dublin, right, besides the City Council. St Patrick's Athletic, who are owned by Gareth Kelleher, who was building the Chicago Spire, right, which hasn't collapsed, never got off the ground. He has a proposal for putting a football stadium on Michael's Estate because it suits his agenda, right? So, you're weaving between all of those agendas, and we talked about on the train coming up this morning. Our job is to try and get to meet the same vision that we had at the very start, to hold that, right? That you would have a significant section of public housing, community facilities, you would deal with social regeneration. So that's why the vision is still really useful to this day about how you judge all of the people coming in. But anyway,
I would say at the moment, if we in St Michael's Estate don't win in, which we mightn't because they're relocating, they have money to buy houses anywhere. You can get houses up beside Mary McAleese if you wanted one. So that's a strategy and agenda for them. But what St Michael's Estate, if we don't win it in that kind of a form, and we'll fight tooth and nail. What we want to do and what we're here to do today is to expose them and expose them and expose them, so that other communities in the city or in Limerick or anywhere else that goes into it, that they won't go into it in the same way as what they did to Devaney, Michael's and Dominic Street. And that's our tool at the moment. So while we feel again on our knees, we still are going to fight it tooth and nail.
I believe you completely.
I just say one thing. It just seems to me that, partly back to Paul in terms of, they're going to come up, just listening to you now, they're going to come up with their alternative solutions. They're going to get the guys from Boston or Berlin who've got money or whatever to try and come in. Which means, I'm going back to this thing, in a sense, we must take the ground that, in the sense that they have lost, even though the thing had, take the difficulties. The fact is that this model can be shown not to work. We need to find ways, both in the public scrutinies of public forums, or within their accountancy forums, or within holding forums ourselves, or forcing the public expenditure people, the accountant auditor general people, to hold hearings about what happened, why it happened, who spent it. Because if we let it go, they will bring in, pardon me, put a bastardised version of the same model, because they can't think any other way. The answer to Longstreet will be something a little different, but it'll be owned by somebody else, and it won't work. So we actually have, if you like, the ammunition. God forgive me if you use the pun.
Case study.
Well, exactly. So the ammunition that, in fact, if that's what you're proposing, then show it transparently out in the open, what you're going to spend, who you're going to spend it, who's it for, what's the result, what difference it's going to make. Now, if we don't learn that lesson now, if we only react to them in terms of saying, well, let's see how the deal can be done, then we haven't learned the lesson from you, you know. I think this stage of the time is to force their solutions out in the open to be costed, because actually it will be another version of the same solution.
Okay, I'm going to end it there. There is some lunch outside, so if you want to continue the conversation outside, go ahead. Just a couple of things before we go. We got a message of support from community activists in Derry who wish you well for the day. Couldn't make it up. There is a sheet going around. If anyone expressed an interest in, we're thinking of pulling together workshops of different communities going through regeneration or pending regeneration across Northern Ireland. If you want to sign up to that, we'll follow up with you later as well. And just sort of lastly on that, particularly like to thank the Unison Community Voluntary branch for supporting today, who've taken the strategic decision to focus on urban regeneration for the next period as well. So thanks very much for that. John, do you want to say something about the book?
No, well, no, the book is due to currency exchange mechanisms. The book is, we're just going to charge 15 sterling, right? Because the time we get your money, put it back into euros and fucking all go around in circles. You know? So, Rodney, just spend your drink money, it's worth it, right? Or your lunch money, I should say.
But thanks very much to John and all the team who worked to Michael.